Hello.
Hello.
Well,
How you guys doing tonight?
good. How
Good.
are you?
Great. I guess you can turn your videos on. There you go. Hello. 2020 has been really kind of rough on everybody, but the weather has
Mm.
been outstanding. It
Yep.
just,
Yes.
I mean, we've just had an awesome weather year. Everything else has kind of been in the tank. Now, what's interesting, just so you guys know, I have two cameras going. I have mine that I'm operating here, and then over here to the other side, I have like everyone's rectangles where I can see their screens. So if it looks like I'm not looking at the camera, I'm looking over at the
That's okay.
faces,
That's okay.
and so I'm doing something a little different here. I'm in my living room. What I have been doing, I've been doing a lot of Zoom conferences with my driving school pre-licensing courses. So with the in New York State, the kids have to any driver to take a road test, you got to take the pre-licensing course.
Right.
Right.
It's 3 to 5 hour class, and we can't go in classrooms. And so the state of New York, they said, well, if you're a driving school that can teach these classes, do it virtually through Zoom. And I don't really have a physical location to teach the classes. I go in and out of different places, and so it's been perfect for me to do through Zoom because I've been doing them in my basement. Basically, I set up a little studio down there, and I said I'm coming out of the basement. I'm gonna sit in the living room. My wife's at work at her dance studio, and so I got the house to myself. So
Oh, that's good.
Works
yeah.
perfectly.
So I guess we can get started here. You have these grandiose plans when you're, I don't know, motorcycle coach, or when you do anything that you really like, and you say, well, I'm gonna go all these different places. I'm gonna ride with all these people. I'm gonna teach all these classes. I'm gonna do all these things, and then life happens, and then quarantines happen, and but I did get a chance to get out some places, and I thought, well, I might as well do it virtually. I mean, I'm teaching through online. It brings me to people that normally I wouldn't be able to interact with. I'm in Rochester, New York, which is between Syracuse and Buffalo. It's not really known as the motorcycling capital of the universe. And typically, if I want to, I guess, spread my message of cornering confidence, I have to go where the motorcyclists are. And through Zoom, you get, I guess, a little bit of everybody showing up, and I'm just going to be admitting people as we go here. My first thing on the agenda was basically just to let everybody know, if I haven't met you before, I'm John Del Vecchio. I'm, the person behind Street Skills and the Cornering Confidence program. I'm a high school teacher. That's my normal day-to-day job, and this school is sort of something on the side that I've been working on since 2015, and I wanted to make myself available to people that take the online course or read the book or see a video on YouTube. And I was a Motorcycle Safety Foundation coach for 10 years where I taught their curriculum. And once I started to go off on my own, I knew I wanted to do something more with advanced training, if you will, lack of a better word. And I said, I could try to be everything to everybody. I could try to do this. I could try to do that. But I said, I'm gonna focus in on the cornering. I think that's the most enjoyable part for many people. I think it's the part where people can get themselves into trouble. And through my own experience, I just knew that I always was seeking a better cornering experience. And after developing the Cornering Confidence program, the book and whatnot, it just kind of worked in that direction. And, I think to myself, oh, maybe I should do something else. Maybe, I should teach this or that. Or I said, I haven't really spread the message enough about the Cornering Confidence, because there's actually more to it than just cornering confidence. I think that the skills in the book and in the course, when I teach at the track, the same curriculum, I think it just makes you a better rider overall. And I think that, controlling the motorcycle is a very important thing for people, not only for their safety, but for their confidence and enjoyment. And, one of the things that is sort of a downer about what we do in motorcycle, instruction, education, or whatnot, is the statistics tend not to yield the results that we really want, that it's going to make riders safer. And I have a hard time believing that if you take the MSF class or any basic training class, that you won't be a better rider than had you just thrown a leg over it. And but when I first started doing on my school, I started with on-road training tours, coaching tours, if you will. And a friend of mine, Dan Pedersen from the smarterusa.org group, he sent me some research that said, well, there really is no evidence that proves through this study that he showed me that taking people on the road training is going to make them safer. But what the training did say, or the research on the training, it said that motorcyclists enjoy the experience more. And I think that's where I put the focus on what my philosophy is, what I'm doing. I think that I can't predict everything. We can't predict everything. We want to be safer. I feel that being in supreme control of your motorcycle makes you safer, but I just want people to enjoy motorcycling to the fullest that they possibly can. And, that's a relative term, because, relative phrase, because what someone thinks is an outstanding experience, someone else might think is ho-hum or run of the mill kind of thing. Now, I've really said a little bit about my introduction here, and I send out a newsletter every month. In the newsletter, I surveyed people to see when they would like to have these, what the topics would be, and based on what people said, I tried to fill the points that they liked as much as possible. And so I wanted this to kind of be a Q&A open session where people could ask me questions about cornering confidence, but also just so that we could build a community, people can share where they are. I've already learned about people from Vancouver that showed up, and I'm meeting for I don't know if it's the first time, or I don't know if we've met before through email or whatnot, but it'd be nice just to, create a community. And, we all have our local riding groups, and that's great too. But it's interesting because when I'm with my riding buddies, I'm not Coach John, the motorcycle, trainer. I'm just the regular guy. And it's interesting because, we have people that tend to have problems from time to time, including myself, but, we don't really talk about, well, hey, let me bring you over to the side, because, I'm kind of off the clock then. And, one of the things I've learned is just a teacher of many different things. Unless someone is really asking for the information or, pursuing the information, they're less receptive to the message. Maybe you've seen this in your riding groups where someone goes up to someone and says, hey, you should really do this. And the person's like, hey, go jump off a bridge kind of thing. Yeah, people really have to be sort of in that kind of context where they want to maybe ask for help. But so I wanted to of course, we'll get to Q&A on cornering confidence. I really haven't had that many opportunities to interact with people about the curriculum this year. The only real event that I've had was at the local track about 90 miles away in Syracuse, Pineview Run. I participated in a track event at a 1 mile track, and I was the street program coach. And it really felt good. And I had a couple of really aha moments myself communicating what I'm trying to teach, because I can be sitting here by myself, but unless people are asking me questions, I really don't know how to phrase things as well as I could, or to improve things. There could be one or two different ways I say things that could make a difference. And I have a YouTube channel, and I sometimes use it to promote what I'm doing and whatnot. And I try to teach things through there. And I have a couple of YouTube ideas for little videos I want to make, because at that event I had been asked certain things and had to do some discovery on my own on the track, and then come back and explain some things a little differently. And it gave me a different perspective into people's heads. This had to really do with body positioning, on the motorcycle from the waist up. And so this is good for me, because if I don't get the questions, I'm not as good at articulating my message. Now this, for example, this is the book. This is my working copy of Cornering Confidence. And this book, the curriculum wouldn't be anywhere near, is I guess quality as I think it is, without students or people or other experts sort of challenging my ideas or asking me questions. And I think that's where I feel maybe through 2020 here, with my lack of being able to get out there and coach people and talk to people as much, I'm sort of, going through a little bit of withdrawal, or I don't know how you want to say it, but I don't want to get stagnant in my explaining what it is that I'm trying to do here. So I wanted this to sort of be a little bit of a social gathering, and also a Q&A about, anything in Cornering Confidence. And really, I guess, by a show of hands, I mean, is it the book that got you here? The YouTube, the book? Anybody read the book? YouTube channel? Online course? Bruce, you here?
Have not read the book, and I was referred to you tonight by a friend who is also on this call. So I really don't know anything about your course or you. I'm just a motorcycle enthusiast who thought I'd check it out tonight.
I mean, do you ride a BMW?
No, I ride a Kawasaki.
Okay.
My friend rides a BMW though.
Is that what, Jan?
That's
Yeah.
Jan.
Yeah. Yeah. So you guys are like buddies from the same town or in the same club? How do you guys?
Extremely separate geographically, but three of us went to college together. We ride together once a year. I just saw your post on Facebook. I'm a member of Motorcycle Sport Touring Association group.
Yeah. Now, I'm glad that you brought that up. The Motorcycle Sport Touring Association is one that I've tried to get more involved with over the past couple of years. Pat, the president, I met at AIM Expo 3-4 years ago, and I was so blown away by the organization, because what I found is that, and I asked Bruce if he wrote a BMW, mostly because the BMW Motorcycle Owners of America Club and the Riders Association to a certain extent, but mostly the BMW MOA, they're the organization that really gave me my start. I did coaching tours at their rallies for 3 years straight, and they just seem to be, I don't know, the perfect, it's like the round peg in the round hole for what I'm doing. And while there's people on Kawasaki's and other kind of bikes, and there's the Northeast Riders Forum on Facebook, there's the Motorcycle Sport Touring Association, there's other wonderful groups. It just tended to seem to me, and that the draw was mostly through the BMW rider. And normally when I do tours or coaching tours or deal with people at the track or whatnot, they're not always on BMWs. As a matter of fact, I just bought my first BMW ever in like May. It's a GS. I'm really not a big Facebook guy. I try to just promote what I'm doing through Street Skills through there. And so I do share events through there, and there's 4 or 5 groups tops that I like to post things to, but I'm glad you came. And so I guess, Jan, what do you guys ride when you take this annual trip? Where do you guys go?
Well, we were all in New England and New York, but I'm in Florida now. And we've been riding mostly New York and New England. I'm just curious to just listen to what you have to say about your techniques. I've been riding for a long time, and I've done a lot of research and a lot of reading, but I was just wanted to see what you had to say. That's why I came to the
Okay.
meeting today.
Great, great. So I guess, is there anyone here that has read about cornering confidence or has any idea of what the techniques are?
No, I'm particularly interested because I ride a GS. 5 years ago, I totaled my GS on a curve,
Okay.
and I lost a little bit of my edge in the cornering department, and so I'm really interested in learning how to get back some of that.
Well, and this is really good, and my school, my technique, my method, my cornering confidence program, it's a soft sell, right? So I appreciate, people wanting to know what I'm talking about. If I do bring up, hey, I have this online course that goes with the book, and I talk about my courses, if it comes across like a sales pitch, it kind of is, but that's sort of the underlying thing of what I do. Everything I do is kind of built off of that. And one of the things that I'm doing now is I entered the gas tank challenge, which is like a Shark Tank thing for the Motorcycle Industry Council through the AIM Expo, and you kind of like, they're helping grow businesses in the motorcycling industry, and I was like, I think ranked 5th out of the top 5, and people were, some of the judges' comments were, people aren't going to want to get training this way, or, you really have to be in the same place, and all these different things. And one of the things that they said was that I say is sort of a competitor, if you wish, of my online course, is that there's free videos out there. And one of the things that, when I was at Pineview, there was a husband and wife couple, and the woman there and the husband, they mostly the wife, I believe, was saying, yeah, that it's nice that you have all these videos out there, but there really is there's no rhyme or reason. There's no progression. It's all just kind of a random video today about braking, a random video about this and that. And that, of course, there's a lot of free information out there, but you're kind of getting a 5 or 10 minute slice of one thing, and that could be good for tips. But I think real transformation has to be like a start to finish, beginning and ending sort of closure, so that you have a transformation at the end. Now, I don't even have my actual book. I'm sitting here in the living room. I got boxes of them in the basement. But the Cornering Confidence book that I have, that basically I could go get one quickly in a little while, but it's a book like any other book. But I made it as sort of my lesson plans, right? So the book could be it's the standalone, if you wanted to get it with your buddies and take it chapter by chapter. Because see, the teacher in me, when I outlined the chapters in the book, they start with, you have your acknowledgments or whatever, but then once you start getting into the skill chapters, there's an objective, and then there's like assessments for you to do on the motorcycle, right? So for example, body position has objectives, okay, to position the body for maximum comfort and control, and to use kiss the mirror technique, right? So those are the objectives. Then we do rationale. I show the skills, and then at the end of the chapter, there's action items or action steps to go out on the bike. So you may take the book with you, keep it in your tank bag, and then work on this. And then once you've done those activities, you move yourself up to the next level. And it's sort of like at the end, everything comes together, and you have complete and total cornering confidence. I mean, it seems a little, I don't want to come across, if you know me as a person, I'm really not too full of myself. What I really love about the Cornering Confidence program is it's the things that I've accumulated over the years and put into a package that I like. And so people may or may not like certain things that I teach. But I'll take you really quickly, because most of you are new to the program. And so I'll give you sort of, the elevator pitch sort of what's in it. And then we can go to your questions from there. So I have what I call guiding principles, right? And the first of the guiding principles is what I call the straight principle. And what that means is we want to keep the motorcycle as vertically straight as possible in the turns, right? Meaning less lean angle. Okay, so less lean, so lean angle is really not your friend, right? When you're lean, you're less stable. And so what I teach are methods to keep the motorcycle more vertically upright in the turn. Now, here are the three main benefits of a straighter motorcycle. So if I go through a turn, it's, let's say, this lean angle versus this, and I'm exaggerating it, what do I gain? Well, I'm going to gain stability. So the more vertically upright the motorcycle is, the more stable it is. Now, I'm not saying you're going to get more traction, because you're not getting more traction from here than here. But what you get is a more stable motorcycle. If you were to lose traction, you have a better chance of regaining traction if the motorcycle is more vertically upright, right? So the basic technique for this is to kiss the mirror to get your chin over your wrist, basically. And what that does is just that simple movement straightens the motorcycle out. And so you get a lean angle at the same speed in the same turn, simply by shifting our chin over our hand, kissing the mirror. You will get a straighter motorcycle without giving up anything, right? So that's a main part about that. We can also go slower. If we go slower, we don't have to lean as much. And speed and direction, speed and steering come a little bit later. The other thing you get from a straighter motorcycle, a more vertically upright motorcycle in the turn, is more ground clearance, right? So if I'm leaning through a turn at this angle, I may drag parts sooner than if I were at this lean angle, right? So that's very important. One other thing, the last, is that you have lean angle in reserve. So now what that means is that if we're at full lean angle in a turn, right? So picture yourself, you're leaning into a turn at full lean angle. How many directions can you change if you're already at max lean angle? You can't go more into the turn. I mean, you could press more, but more lean is more risk. You might drag parts and you might lose traction. So if you're giving yourself a straighter motorcycle, now if I'm leaning a turn, I can lean in and I can lean out. I have two exit strategies, if you will, to change my line. And your line, it could have something in the way. In the real world, if you're on a track, it's clean, you can trust the line. But if you go into a turn this time of year, I mean, there could be a branch in the road, right? Because the wind or, all the branches are falling in my backyard now. So you go into a turn, there's a branch. Well, there's other options. We can ride over it. We can try to avoid it. But so the straight principle, again, it's not, I mean, obviously going down the road, we want to keep the motorcycle straight, but we're talking in the corner, a more vertically straight motorcycle. But in my experience, what I'm trying to teach is it's a waist up process. And, when I see that's where I think the Cornering Confidence program is really different than a lot of other programs, because even my idols, the people I look up to in training, motorcycle, gurus, if you will, they always have something to say about below the waist, where to point the knee, where to point the toe, where to weight the peg in this and that. Now, I do give some advice on below the waist, but what I'm teaching here, and I think people really want to know, is how can I do this without exhausting myself? Because if you're going to spend this 3-day trip with your buddies once a year, or you're going to take these, these day-long trips, if you're basically moving off and on the motorcycle all day long, it's going to be pretty exhausting. Now, people might like that. So I'm not trying to, tell them they can't do that. What I'm saying is my method has you controlling your speed 100% throughout the beginning, throughout the whole curve. Like what I tell people at the end of, straight and flat chapter is, if it's straight and flat, do that. If straight and flat, do that. Meaning, if you find something that straightens the motorcycle better, or you like the way it works, or it gets you to straighten the motorcycle more in the turn, then that would be an effective thing. A lot of times what I'll say in my courses and things is, I want you to just go right now, because we talk about braking, and I say we're going to go for a ride for 20 minutes. I want you to think about if you're keeping the chassis flat and doing things that keep the chassis flat. I could say, use your brakes, use the front brake, use the rear brake, use less throttle, don't be so abrupt. And I do use that language. But if I say, try to keep the chassis flat, then people can start to make their own connections because motorcycling is a very difficult thing to teach other people. Like ask Marc Marquez to show you how he does it. You know what I mean? Right? He couldn't just articulate it in words. So there's symbolism and actual techniques that I tried to make as very basic things that bring you to those points. But you would find in my program, I don't talk a whole lot about below the waist. I do have techniques for below the waist, but we're primarily kissing the mirror. And what you'll find is many people, they think they're really getting in, and they think they're leaning over far into the turn, but they're really not. So that's the straight principle. I appreciate the question, but I would just defer people if I were teaching them right now in a course and that question came up, I would say, okay, what we want to do is, the goal is to keep the motorcycle more vertically upright, okay, less lean angle. To do that, we would lean more or less. So we're not on motorcycles now, but if I were, it works like this. I have a chest center line. My motorcycle has a center line. At minimum, we want to go into a turn with those in the same position. That's the minimum. Okay, we don't want to like do a dirt bike sliding style or supermoto fighting the lean. Okay, if I'm going this way, we want to either be in line or get our chest inside the motorcycle center line. The further I get my center line in, the more vertically upright the motorcycle will be. So what I would say to you, if we were in a coaching tour, I would say, okay, follow me, and then you would see me go as far over as I could, and you'd see the motorcycle more vertically upright, and then you would see me get so that my chest was in the center line, and my motorcycle my body position would alter the actual lean of the motorcycle. That's a pretty simple technique. Kissing the mirror gets it done. Waist up, butt on the seat. And by the way, that was the aha thing that the person brought up at the track. They said, I'm having trouble, steering and using the controls and the throttle. They were on I think they were on a brand new GS, okay, BMW. And I was thinking, okay, well, how do I explain we don't want to put a lot of weight on the handlebars. We don't want to put a lot. We want to be very neutral. And it was the trunk. It was the trunk of my body. As I went around, I kind of felt like it was just like a sack of dirt, you know, just plopped on the seat. And what happens is if you're, I don't know if it would work as well on like full on sport bikes, but if you get your body on the motorcycle and you kind of go, you find where, like, if you're too forward, there's too much weight. If you lean back, it's not comfortable. But there's a balance point where your body's just like set, like planted on the seat. And with that, it's such a nice range to be in. Like, there's a little bit of movement there, but because everything now is just light as a feather because you had that weight planted. And so that's generally how we do the straight principle, okay, is upper body movements. The other part of it is the flat. That's a guiding principle as well. This one takes more skill than just kissing the mirror. So if a motorcycle, as it goes down the road, the chassis pitches, right? So if I accelerate hard, it's going to have an effect on the suspension. Okay, it actually extends both. Okay, your spring will extend in the rear and your forks will extend. Weight will shift rearward, but that's what your suspension is doing. If you were to brake, you're going to compress the front and the rear will rebound or extend, if you will, right? So we know these things are going to happen when we're riding. So what we want to do with the flat principle is keep the chassis flat. We want to keep our chassis as flat as possible because we want the suspension traveling in its most supple or its active range. Okay, if we're asking our suspension to operate at its extreme either way, that's really gonna send mixed messages to the motorcycle. It's gonna wreak havoc on our direction. It'll definitely have a traction problem. Okay, so like think about someone if you accelerate hard, your front wheel is gonna start to lift off the ground. Now it's going to be making less contact with the pavement. Okay, we don't want that to happen. And so what I teach people is braking, gear changing, throttle techniques that keep the chassis as flat as possible. Because even if you brake hard, many of you may have had this happen to you or someone you know. You're going into a turn, you brake hard, you don't wash out the front wheel, but the rear comes loose, right? And that's because that chassis is severely pitched. And we can't steer the motorcycle if our rear tire comes off the ground. And so we need to have weight front and rear. Now, there's an exception to this. And that's kind of like the crown jewel of the course, which is braking, trailing our brakes into the turn, trail braking, where we weight the front tire as we initiate that change. Okay, as we make that change, because we want, so for example, we want to keep the suspension balanced, but as I go into a turn, I want weight on this front tire. Because, I mean, you guys ever go like Route 555 in Ohio or some of these roads where they're like this, and then they're so hilly, and then you get to the crest, and then right when you get to the top, you see that the road shifts this direction. Well, think about you're trying to change direction on a front tire that's barely touching the surface of the road. As you crest that hill, it's unloading your suspension, and now you're like, oh, the road's turning, but there's no weight on the front tire. And so you go to make that turn, like hopefully it gets enough grip to make that turn. That's an extreme case of what happens if you use basic training at a spirited motorcycling pace. So if you're if you're sport riding in the twisties and you get all your braking done before you turn in, you're going to release the brakes before you make that turn in, which is going to rebound the suspension, and it's going to lift your tire off the ground. And that it not fully, but it's not going to be as weighted for that nice turn in, right? We want to weight that tire as we make that turn. And there's ways to do this while keeping the motorcycle relatively flat still, because we need to keep the rear tire down. So those are the guiding principles, straight and flat. And the flat, again, is more, that's more of a fine tuning activity that you have to work on, because kissing the mirror is something that people can really, really get quickly. And I've had people just say, that's all I got from the track day today, and they were satisfied. Now, so the straight and flat are the guiding principles. What the flat principle gives you is predictable steering. And I used to say better traction, but people say, well, what's better traction? What I mean by that is you get a better distribution of traction between the front and rear. So think about it ideally like this. We know that the weight's going to be shifting constantly. We can't stop that. It's impossible, right? The suspension's going to be going up and down. Weight's going to shift when we start and stop, right? We know this. But there are real things we can do to minimize that chassis pitch. And the reason is we want to keep the tires down. We want to keep them as balanced as we can. And so that's what I mean by improve, better traction. Another thing is you're going to get more predictable steering. And so if let's say you roll on the throttle hard as you exit a turn, what's happening is you shift the weight rearward to the front suspension. Now, on most motorcycles, it's rebounding and it's extending to its fullest length. So that's your wheelbase is going to lengthen. And that lengthening of it is going to make it more difficult to steer, more difficult to make the turn, because a longer wheelbase is going to make it more difficult to make the turn. Now, we all know you power out of a curve. That's riding 101, and that won't change. But the rate that we would, let's say, throttle out could have an effect on our actual line. Because one of the things we get into, we talk about when I talk about braking and throttle, our speed is the primary influence over our line, right? So what I'll show and demonstrate in the book and whatnot is that, think about when you turn into your driveway, right? What speed do you turn into your driveway at? Probably about 10 miles an hour, because it's a 90-degree turn. Now, if you try to turn into your driveway at 40 miles an hour, not even the best motorcyclist on the planet could turn into your driveway at 40 miles an hour. It's not possible. So the thing that we have to wrap our brains around, even if we're riding in the most twistiest environment that there is, the tail of the dragon, Mulholland Drive, whatever it is, we still must slow the motorcycle to make tight turns. And that's something that is pretty obvious to people, but they forget that. They want to take the corner that's 30 miles an hour at 60. Now, maybe, the sign says warnings 30 miles an hour ahead. We know that, motorcycles can probably breeze through there a lot easier. But the point I'm trying to make is a legitimate, turn that, will be appropriate at 30 miles an hour. You can't take it at 60. And so we want to control our speed with our brake and throttle into those environments. Now, then I move on. We talk about a lot of the general things you would imagine people would talk about in the cornering course. We talk about lines, We talk about what let's see here, the lines. We basically go into lines, cornering. I mean, I had a little bit on smoothness, but again, the smoothness chapter and the vision chapters are in there because they need to be in there for it to be a comprehensive program. But being smooth, having vision, those things are all good. I have a couple of good things there. Once we get into line selection, I talk a little bit differently about the line. And one of my, I guess, points of pride is that I focus on what are called the real world or ideal lines and ideal perfect world scenario, and then the real world lines, because most programs are going to say, okay, look, you're going to do late apex all the time. Okay, you're going to do, this is it, outside, inside, outside, or this is the line you're going to take. You're always going to do this, period. And it's good to plan your line. And I talk about how to plan your line. I try to simplify how to plan your line, but I also focus in the book on how to change your line in a curve. So changing your line in a curve, there could be two reasons why you might want to do this. First of all, for positioning benefits. I'm going into a left-hander, my head's hanging over the double yellow, cars could be coming the other way. I don't like this lane position. I'm going to change my line mid-corner to get me away from the center line. Think about your basic course you took or just basic riding. We have the left, middle, right portion of our lane, and we're going to pick the one that gives us the best situation. The same can be said for in a turn. Okay, just because you're in a curve, it doesn't mean you don't have choices on where to place your motorcycle while you're in the curve. So when I talk about that, we first talk about it for positioning benefits and techniques, how to make that lane change safely while leaned over. So that's in there. And then of course the last chapter, it says, well, look, you got cornering hazards here. Now there's something in your lane, you have to get out of the way. I mean, think about this, right? Like if you go into a turn and there's something in the road, that's not the time to assess your ability to change your lane positioning in a curve. Okay? Because that's where you panic. That's where you maybe hit the thing when you could have avoided it. And so I find that the feedback from students in my coaching tours and in the track classes and all the years I've been doing this, they find basically they're just light swerves that you would do while leaned. You could practice them in sweepers so that there's really no risk. But they said, I never knew you could do that. I never thought of doing that. You know, most experts will tell you, or if you were to, let's say, go to the coffee shop and talk to your friends and say, hey, I had to change my line. Did you follow me? Yeah, did you see me change my line? It would be a negative thing. They would say, you must not be good. You had to change your line. What's wrong with you? You don't know how to figure out a curve, 50 feet before you enter, you haven't figured out the whole thing yet? What's wrong with you? And so I take the approach that you can't possibly know everything about that turn, even if you see it, it's perfect sight distance, because you don't know certain surface characteristics, perhaps. You don't know where the slowest part is. There's so many things you don't know. And what I'm trying to eliminate for you are those gaps where people are just hoping, crossing their fingers, nothing gets in their way. My thing is, look, expect something's going to be in your way today. All right, when you're riding down the road with your buddies in the twisties for a day ride or just an after dinner ride, something is going to be in the road somewhere. There's going to be a deer. There's going to be gravel. I mean, wouldn't it be great if we knew we could ride somewhere where there'd be no gravel, in the curves? And by the way, that's the biggest confidence killer of all the things when I just my friends, me personally, talking to people, gravel's what knocks them out. And they see the gravel, they just short circuit, and maybe they make it through, maybe they don't, but we can definitely say that was kind of a touch and go moment on the bike. Now, the big kapow at the end of the whole program. And by the way, you can't tell someone at the beginning of a book or a course, just do this and you'll be fine. The purpose behind the way that the program's laid out, the book and the courses or whatever in my curriculum, is you just follow the program. Just do the objectives every chapter. Master the technique that's in the chapter. Once you master the technique that's in the chapter, by the time you get to the end, you're already doing the confidence, the cornering confidence, centerpiece, which is trail breaking. And in my experience as a motorcyclist and as a coach, very few people really understand what trail breaking is. Okay, a lot of people do, but most people don't understand what a silver bullet proper trail breaking technique is. It works whether you're in town. It works whether you're driving in traffic. It works when you're in the twisties. It works. It's not just a braking technique, okay? Trail braking it's an advanced cornering technique, all right? People think, it's a braking technique, but it's not. Trail braking is what you need to be doing if you want confidence at a faster pace in the twisties. And the general idea is what I call the secret weapon, okay? It's brake throttle transitioning with the appropriate timing, okay? If you're not, let's say you've been riding for a long time. If you tip into a corner with your hand fully curled on the grip, you're selling yourself so short. Now if I were to, let's say I get my braking done, 2-finger, 4-finger, whatever, and I'm about to tip in. If you tip into that twisty and your hand's curled on the grip, you're just now a passenger through the remaining portion of that turn. There's very limited things you can do. You can give it gas, sure. You can reach for the brake eventually, but then you're going to have to reload the suspension, and that's where we tuck the front end. There's so many things that can go wrong because you've turned over the control of the motorcycle to the motorcycle itself. When you use the secret weapon, it's all brake throttle transitioning. So I can control my speed with the brakes until I am ready to transition to throttle. If I'm not happy with my speed, if I'm not happy, my speed is going to predict my direction. Remember, we talked about that. So if my speed is fast, but I still need to slow more, but time's up, curve's here, then you're going to hold on for dear life through the turn. And I like to basically say this as well at this point in this explanation. The reason why we don't crash more as experienced motorcyclists is because we have experience, so we guess right most of the time. Okay, so we sort of approach a corner, we think we know how it's going to go, we let off the brake, we do our thing, and we make it through, and it's because we have experience. But every now and then we guess wrong, we go for that wild ride, we get a pucker moment, and then we start to say, geez, our confidence could get a little bit shook because nobody wants to ghost ride their motorcycle. We want to be in full control of it. And is a person who misunderstood trail braking for many years. It was kind of like the missing link in the entire my entire cornering experience. It was the missing thing that made it all work. And it's basically taught by using brake throttle transitions all the time. So you're going to use brake throttle transitions just riding around. You use brake throttle transitions, and I show people how to do this. By the way, I got free videos to show you how to do this on YouTube. There's actually one that has like 72,000 views or I gotta see if it's that many. It's got tens of thousands of views. It's the only video I really have that's big like that, and it's called I forget the exact title of it now, just as I'm sitting here with you. But people say, wow, it's called Trail Braking Sucks. I put the thumbnail Trail Braking Sucks to get people's attention, but I put the term Trail Braking Sucks. If you watch that video, it explains, I actually have an iPad on my motorcycle. I'm sitting in my garage on my Grom or whatever, and I'm showing you what I'm doing on my hand as we're looking at me riding with a cam on my motorcycle. And I talk about when and where I will be using the brake throttle transitions. And that is really, that's it. All I'm trying to do is teach people kiss in the mirror and how to use proper brake throttle transitions. Now, one of the things that I'll stop talking in a minute, and maybe you guys can ask a question or two, but let's say you're on a ride with your friends. There's 3 or 4 of you. You're wicking it up in the twisties. Everyone's having a ball. Then you come up on an RV or a car and you start bunching up behind each other, right? What's happened to your speed? It's gone down, right? So when you go into that turn, it'll be like a basic rider course situation. You're entering, you've slowed as much as you possibly could for the turn, so you need to give it throttle as you lean, or else you'll fall into the ditch. So throttle is going to help give you more speed, it's going to widen your arc, okay? So you have to make the transition. If I'm coming in straight slow, let's say I'm going behind that RV, I have to transition from brake to throttle earlier to make that turn. But then you get into a straight, you pass the RV. Well, now that's not going to work. So I'm going to enter, now I choose my faster pace as I enter the turn. There's just me and my buddies, I'm leading, let's say. So there's no one else to dictate my turn-in speed than me. So as I approach, we're riding faster now, okay, because that's the sport riding, that's what we're doing here. I'm going to use my brake, but I'm going faster now than I was behind the RV. So if I let go of the brakes now, not only is my suspension going to rebound and I get less of a rich contact patch, but my speed is faster. So that's going to put me on a wider arc. I call it a slighter arc because I use slight and sharp. I just picked those words. So what we want to do is, as we go into the turn faster now, we're holding on to the brake. We're tipping in still on the brake. This is going to hold our weight on the front. We're going to control the spin of our front tire. We're going to change our geometry to make this turn. We're slowing our speed, and only when I'm happy with my speed and steering will I transition from brake to throttle. Okay? They call it trail braking because you're trailing off your brake pressure past the entry point of the turn. Okay? Used to be more thought of as a racing technique. It's not. It's the best street riding technique there is. So the only difference, so the other video idea I have for my next YouTube, I usually do them when in the wintertime I can't ride kind of thing, is I want to explain that a little bit more. That the only difference between trail braking and regular braking for cornering is it has to do with your speed and when you actually release the brakes. Because when you release the brake, go vertically upright before you tip in behind the RV, you're using the same technique as you would if you held it past the turn in and released it when you were happy with your speed and steering out. And there's no question because you're slowing until you're satisfied. And the traction works better for the turn. We get our body position in there, kissing the mirror. We got a vertically upright motorcycle. And then at the right moment, you just transition and power out, and that's it. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is what I'm trying to teach. What I was saying about the trail braking being misinterpreted is a lot of people think that trail braking is dragging your rear brake. Okay, so like I'm doing low speed maneuvers, or I'm going into a turn, I'm gonna just use rear brake as I tip in. While technically dragging your rear brake a little bit as you tip into the turn is technically trail braking because you're using your brakes past the tip-in point, past the entry point of the turn. Okay? That's all trail braking is. But it is best done with the front brake. And when I'm doing my sport riding, I will not be using my rear brake probably that much. In traffic, in many situations, you want to use both brakes. Obviously, the rear brake can be also used to keep the chassis flatter. I talk about, there are situations where you may want to use the rear, even in a faster type of riding situation. But you're not going to have to lean that motorcycle as much as you think you're going to have to if you're trail braking to the apex, your happy apex. So, like for example, let me just show you. If I have, so here's the corner apex right there, right? So you go in, you're going to enter this turn at 50 miles an hour, right? This would probably be kind of like your slowest point before you move out, your apex. Your friend, though, comes in at 30. They'll probably have a different apex. They'll probably like have the slowest point here and then kind of power out, right? So the corner apex and our apex can be different. And so it has to do with speed. Okay, when you transition from brake to throttle, has to do with speed, period. In my mind, if you ever watch like racing, they talk about, oh, so-and-so, he got too hard on the front brake, so the front tire washed out and he skidded out. They're trail braking on the track. They're using their brakes while they're going into the turn until they're happy with their speed and direction, right? But then they curl their hand back on the grip as they proceed through the track because they know every 6 corners or 5, there's 20, maybe 10 corners. So they know where their hand has to be for every one. With us, we need to be in the I call this the brake throttle transition default hand position. We need to be like this when we're cornering. Because unlike the racer that trail brakes at a higher speed cornering situation, we don't know how tight the turn is. We're going to go through 100 of these things in just the next hour, and they're all going to be different. And so we have to keep the fingers resting on the lever at all times so that we can slow and go as necessary. And that, my friends, is basically what I'm trying to do here with the Cornering Confidence book and the online course. The online course is, I'm kind of smitten with it because no one's doing it. There's nothing like it out there. Maybe it's because there's no demand, but I don't really see it that way. You know, because there's a lot of demand for people that want to improve their motorcycling, and I think maybe it's just people don't think, well, I can learn from watching videos and doing an online training thing. But in the absence of having someone there with you showing you, you know what, you got two choices. You know, fly John to Vancouver and spend the day with him, feed him chili, okay, put him up in the guest room, all right, or do the video, follow along. It you know what, actually, the most recent piece of feedback I got, or review, because I was asking my community to give me information because I need to put this pitch together. And the guy said, look, I'm in British Columbia, or he said wherever I was, he goes, look, I can't get to where training is. There isn't a lot of training near me. There's nowhere to go. You know, you have to travel great distances, and I'm finding that out myself because I'm trying to take this American Super Camp. It's like a dirt track school. It got postponed, and then the new dates I can't do. As a matter of fact, I can do the dates next week, but I live in New York State, and my governor shut down Delaware. So if I travel to Delaware for this 2-day class over the long weekend for Columbus Day, I have to quarantine for 14 days. And it's my schedule, the distance, the this, the that, the cost. There's so many reasons why people don't follow up on their, on building their skills. But that's the general idea. You were saying, Don, that you had a mishap last year.
So anyway, I was riding to this rally in Iowa. I had this quick little corner, it was like a little Y off of a curve. And then shortly after that, it was an uphill, not a huge curve, but an uphill curve. Well, when I threw it, I picked my line, threw it into the line, and I realized my front tire was going to fall off the edge of the inside of the pavement, and it had washed out. So there was like a 4-inch rut halfway around this curve. And I immediately said, this might hurt. And I knew my front tire was going to fall off, and it did, of course. And off and down we went, and a couple hundred yards later, and down in this valley I landed, and I walked away, thank God, but that's what happened. And ever since then, I lost my little bit of my edge that I had for cornering tight corners. But like I said, I've never had a class in anything to do with cornering.
Yeah. Well, experience is a really good thing. And that's probably why you've made it as far as you have. You rode as a young kid. When you have a mishap, you fall over, it really knocks you for a loop.
Yeah, I cited it.
We all know the people that have gone down and they've never been the same. There was a fellow we ride with, he almost had his head hit by a mirror on a truck coming the other way, and I think it really shook him up. And we can have these close calls where we're like, geez, I think the biggest thing is we don't know how to correct it for the future. That's where we run into trouble. So if we have a mishap and we're like, well, geez, what did I do? What could I have done differently? Sometimes there's nothing you can do different for whatever reason. Other times, there is something that you could trace back to. But I like to, when I talk about like crashing and mishaps and things like that, I like to say, well, you can still have confidence in your ability, even if you crash or have a problem, if you have the right set of skills. Because if you look at the racers, like Marc Marquez crashes like every weekend. He's not afraid to get back on the bike and do the same thing all over again. Difference is we're not supposed to be at the cutting edge of our limits.
Hi there, how are you?
Take a look at that Trail Breaking Sucks video, okay? Then I made another one that I call it the world's best trail breaking video or something, and it fell short of that. It never got picked up in the algorithms, But it is also, I tried to replicate, I think with the Trail Breaking Sucks, the term Trail Breaking Sucks video, I think I kind of caught lightning in a bottle. It resonated with people. So I tried to, replicate it in a better way. And you can watch that one as well. I may have a playlist also in my YouTube channel that's all trail breaking things. And, I would be remiss if I didn't say I had my own issues too, okay, in corners. But what makes it so that I can get back up and do it again is I say, look, this is the reason why this happened. I was distracted. I wasn't paying attention. This type of thing generally is the problem. Or there was an object I couldn't avoid, something like that. But that's the mindset you want to have. You got to find out what was that gulf of execution between what I want to do and what happened and how I can prevent that. But at the end of the day, Don, it's like some things you just can't stop. Like,
well, I want to say there's maybe two things that probably I did wrong, but other than take the wrong too tight of a line. I'm always a full on the throttle hand guy, like you said. That's funny you said that, because I always have my hand on the throttle. And I think what happened was I caught the inside of that corner. I knew my front tire was going to fall off. And I think as soon as it did, I think I tried to straighten up my line. And I think that's where my front tire slid out from underneath. And that's why I high-sided off down into the other side of Never Never Land.
Now, one other comment that I can make that goes along these lines. I don't know the circumstances behind what happened to you, okay? What I can tell you is that if we're riding with a flatter chassis, if you were mindful of that, you may not have had maybe as much weight on the front tire. Okay, so if you had, obviously you're going to turn, you have some weight on the front tire, and I'm not blaming you. What I'm saying is, if you're keeping the chassis flat and you're keeping a little bit more rearward weight, now you're in the active part of your suspension. And because what happens is then it might be able to soak up even a nasty bump. Because if you bottom the forks and hit that nasty crack or whatever it is, then you're going to lose traction potentially. And that may be sort of your situation. I don't know for sure. What I can say is we were on a really twisty road in Pennsylvania. That's where we like to ride in New York. New York's got some good roads, but really good stuff. You get down to Pennsylvania a couple hours away from home. And this one road is such a nice road, but the pavement was really crap. And I just remember going into this right-hander, and there was just two big, they were potholes. It was more like a pothole is a hole. This was more like a stretch of pavement. And because I was doing my thing with the trail braking and coming in slower, not as fast as speed, I felt I hit the sucker, and I thought I was going down, and I hit the bottom stops. I bottomed my forks, but the motorcycle kept upright. I may have maybe left my lane a little bit. I can't really remember as much. I just know I made it through that one. But it seems like a similar situation. You're hitting this thing that motorcycle's not supposed to take this bump at this speed, leaned over, and then you just lose the front end, and you try to say, well, what could I be doing there? Now, another thing, my one friend hit gravel. It looked like they had chip sealed, and they swept it up, and they had painted the lines. We thought we were, home free. Well, he hit the grader must have left a really thick patch right in the turn, and he hit it, and it took him down. And he said, what could I have done differently? What can I have done differently? And there's really not a whole lot you can do differently. But what I told him was he likes to lean. And again, even if he was using the straight principle, he probably could have had trouble, because you're asking the tire to hold the line, and you're going to go through gravel.
Right.
It was graded poorly there. It was not just loose gravel. It was actually channeled there by, what I would think neglect in the Department of Transportation. But I said, listen, the only thing I can say in that instance is, if you're in a straighter, if you have your motorcycle in a straighter position, you can maybe regain easier if you lose traction. Also, one of the things that you learn as you look at different types of motorcycles, one of the reasons why we want to be vertically straight as well as the suspension. The suspension can handle bumps better vertically versus leaned over. Now, the suspension will work leaned, but it will work better up and down. So if your motorcycle in that turn was perhaps a little more vertical, could it have been the thing that kept you up? You know what I mean? It's like, don't know, wasn't there, you're the only one, and maybe not, we don't know. But that's why, like, I try to tell my friends, or like my one friend there, or people I talk to, straight and flat's going to give your suspension the best chance to do its thing. In the straighter principle is going to help you if you get a little bit loose. You're going to have time to react. Whereas if you're at max lean angle, it just happens before you know it. Now, like I said, my friend he could have been, vertically upright going through that turn, handlebar steering, and hit that stuff and gone down, because, you need traction to change direction. And he didn't have traction for that moment, which is kind of interesting because I was right in front of him and I went through the same turn. My line was different. And I could have hit that line too. What would have happened? We don't know. But it didn't work out for him.
So tell me about your course, the book, the videos.
We'll look it up.
Yeah. So the Cornering Confidence book is the curriculum. It's more detailed. Okay. Then I made an online course that models the same chapters. And so the objectives are the same. I cover much of the content, but it's kind of like brief. It's a brief rendition of the essential things that people would need to know, is like the rationale behind the techniques, because in a book you can read quicker certain things, but when people are watching a video or whatnot, they don't want the video to be really long. And the longest video is 8 minutes. Most of them are 2 to 5 tops, because people that's what we're accustomed to. I don't like to sit through videos that are that long,
Right.
But, so I've kind of nipped and tucked. I've extracted the important thing, and then from there, it gives you little quizzes in there, and there's video demonstrations. One of the things that stinks about a book is you can't do video. Okay, so that's the general idea. Now, when I do coaching tours, which is interesting, because with the book and online course, I don't really need to do as many coaching tours, because my thing is I could just meet people out in the wild and we can, practice the skills in a more informal setting, no money changing hands and, that kind of thing. I wouldn't have to get insurance, and we would just be riding together, practicing the skills, and my compensation would come through, enrolling in the course, buying the book, that kind of thing. Because what I found is, if I actually run coaching tours, they're risky business. It costs people more money. We have to be in a certain place at a certain time. And, there's waivers, there's insurance, and all kinds of things that just make it a messier thing. Whereas if I use the online course, then I meet up with people. Like the next time I go to rallies for the BMW clubs, I'll be there as another attendee, maybe a seminar here and there, maybe just going out for like a reunion ride with the people in the course, and there's really no strings attached. I mean, you do a coaching tour, you're sort of responsible for people's motorcycle condition,
Right.
their behavior, that kind of thing. And this sort of takes a little bit of that edge off so that I can meet more informally with people. And that's, in 2020, my goal was to do just that. Go down to the tail of the dragon, go to some different places and say, look, Saturday I'll be there. I'd like people to show up at the resort down at the bottom of the hill. And from there, we could just practice the skills and hang out and that kind of thing. So that's sort of where I am right now with courses, formal courses. I'm also really interested in pursuing with the Pine View Run Track in Syracuse. I know that's far from where you are, but I had a really enjoyable experience coaching there with a dirt school and then a track school. So I was the street school, and it was 3 different disciplines, one weekend, And it was I never saw any track do that kind of event before. It was just, for the first event, it was so awesome. And I had only three signed up for my session, which only three, we really had a chance to interact, and it worked out so well. And so that's the general idea behind it.